So I think that's what will happen with the short-term rental industry. It just has to catch up. I mean, will there be places where there's still not regulation? Probably. I mean, there's still places where there's like literally no regulation and it's a free-for-all. You can do whatever you want. There's some places like that in Texas. But I do think that it will even out and that, it'll catch up and, we'll probably get more regulated like the hotel industry, if I had to guess, just for the safety aspect and saving lives. That would be the direction I think it's going to go in like 20 years.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the STR Investing Podcast. I am your co-host, Mark Lumpkin, and today we've got a super special guest. I know I probably say that every week, but I'm really excited for this one because this is something that many of us don't talk about, don't think about, but we should, because we've got Katie from STR Law. And Katie, say hi to everybody. How are you?
Hi, it's nice to meet everyone here. My name's Katie Johnson. I host myself and I also have a boutique law firm. And so I'm based in Michigan, but I help people nationwide on all things legal for short-term rental owners. So anything transactional, contracts, LLC setup, trademarks, trust and estates, things like that. I just try to help people sleep better at night knowing they're legally protected.
I love it. And that's why I'm so excited about today's episode, Katie. I've followed you on LinkedIn for quite a while. I know we've been connected, and it's going to be fun to talk some legal jargon and get into what things people need to be doing to protect themselves, protect their guests, protect their investment. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I'd love to kind of rewind and start just hear your story and figure out where you're from, how you became an attorney, how you got into the short-term rental niche. You might have wanted to be an attorney as a little kid, but I couldn't imagine that you were like, hey, I want to be an attorney for short-term rental folks. So how did you get here? Tell us your journey.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I've been an attorney for 15 years now. I graduated in 2011 from University of Michigan Law School. And I initially wanted to be an attorney to do like litigation and, do trial work and things like that. And I did for a while. And, I think probably a big reason I became an attorney is my dad's an attorney too. He's actually a real estate attorney, and he's been a real estate attorney for 40 plus years. Awesome resource for me whenever I have anything complex, really helpful. And so that's, a big driver of too why I kind of got into this real estate niche, because, I had my dad to look up to and all his clients and things like that. So when I started investing and saw sort of a need for a short-term rental specific attorney, I decided to, start my own firm and get this going.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Did you start your own firm at the beginning, or did you work for your dad for a while or for another law firm?
Yeah, so I had a long career in the government too. I did federal investigations for a while, which actually can be pretty helpful when I'm trying to find someone. I'm pretty good at finding people. And then I worked for my dad for a bit, and then I spun off there and just started my own thing. Yeah, I just kept getting a ton of clients and in this Airbnb space, just word of mouth, and then now it just continues to tumble and grow. And yeah, so I started my own thing.
Cool. I love that. That's really, really cool. So let's talk about the host side of things. How long have you been a host? Are you managing your own properties? Are you managing for other people?
A little bit of both. So we've been a host, my husband and I, since 2015. We started back in the day when, you could just throw anything on Airbnb. I actually looked at my listing. I think I did a post on this on LinkedIn. I was like, oh my gosh. I thought I was crushing it with the design, the decor, everything. It's very embarrassing. My property looked like from Chicago. And so we started just renting half of our house out. We bought our first house and we're like, you know what? We could block off half of this, rent a couple bedrooms out on Airbnb. And it really took off and more than paid our mortgage. And we were like, wow, what else could we do? Could we buy a standalone house? And then we just started investing in Michigan because we were from Michigan, and eventually moved back here after building our business. And as we built it, we decided we could do it for other people as well. So we have a boutique property management business as well that primarily my husband runs.
That's so cool. Good for you guys. I would imagine that you probably don't feel like this, but you're definitely OGs in the space. My opinion is always, if you've been doing this for over 10 years, you're like an OG because it's such a young and new industry. And so you guys have gone through the gamut. You've seen the total changes, the pre-COVID, what used to work. You saw travel industry totally die for 6 months, and then you saw it come back to life ripping and roaring, and then you saw it normal out. And so that's really, really cool. Good for you guys. Great experience. Are most of your properties in Michigan?
All of them at this point. We sold our Chicago property actually this year. And yeah, so we own 5 properties here, just along the coast. We're kind of slow and steady investors. We buy 1 a year and then just continue to do so.
Awesome. Good for you guys. Yeah, the Michigan's a very unique market, and it's crazy beautiful, especially in the summertime. I see some photos of the lakes and it looks like the Bahamas. And so Do you see a lot of tourism? Do you have a peak season? Is it summertime when everybody's up there? Is it kind of year round?
Yeah, definitely we have a peak season. I would say like our strong seasons from around May to October, really good, strong, decent rental rates. Highest rates, of course, being in July. Like that's our best month. And then June's decent. August is decent as well. May's okay. October, September is still good. And then it just sort of tails. We still have like tons of bookings. Like we have a high volume bookings in terms of our properties and stuff like that, but it's just the rates are different. So I might charge like a quarter of what I charge in the summer, in the winter and off season. But the summer, that's really where the getting's good in Michigan for sure. I think we make more than half of what we make in the entire year in the summer.
Good for you guys. The price per night is pretty seasonal, right? And that's one of the things about short-term rentals that you've got to stay on top of. And I'm sure you guys have learned that over time as being hosts and property owners. We've got a really seasonable property here in Florida where 3-4 times revenue, right? You could charge 4 times as much in the summer per night as you can charge in the off season. But my opinion has always been the most costly night is the night that's empty. And so you kind of take the revenue as it comes. Or do you agree with that? Do you disagree? I know that's a very controversial statement. Some people are like, nope, I'm not going to drop my rates. I might be at a lower occupancy, but I'll make more money. The house will have less wear and tear. And I understand that argument. My thoughts have always been like, I just want people there all the time. I don't want the house to sit empty for a week.
I'm a butts and seats gal too. Yeah, no, that's what we do too in terms of our strategy. I know there are both. Like we actually had a property management client we had who fired us because we have more of a butts and seats strategy and they're more the strategy that you're talking about. And they didn't like seeing that. But I mean, the numbers spoke for themselves. I made more than $2,000 over what they'd made the year before, higher occupancy, lower nightly rates, but I made more money. But they still just didn't like that. So it's like, again, like a matter of personal preference. And it depends what your goals are for the property. Like if you're just trying to maybe make a break even, then maybe it doesn't matter, right? But if you're trying to make some money on it, then yeah, I mean, I'd rather just get someone in there. Now with a caveat, like I don't want to go too low or anything like that because there are like, you go too low, you can get some bad guests sometimes. But so you just have to be careful in terms of the nightly rate there. But we tend to find the sweet spot.
Yeah, I love that. Cool. So let's talk about STR Law. Like I think obviously that's people are tuning in and going, okay, we've talked about taxes and we've had CPAs on the show and those have always been really big popular episodes, but we've never talked about short-term rental law and regulations and people being sued by guests and OTA claims and it's always hot topics. And I love that you and your firm have a focus on helping hosts specifically because there's not very many attorneys out there doing that. And so was this something that you knew all along you wanted to do? Did STR Law pop up because you started getting more and more clients asking for that? How did you come about being the GOAT, the STR attorney in the space?
Oh, well, I like that. The GOAT. I would say, I think that I just felt a calling for it, and it just sort of made sense for me as I started my practice. Initially, I hadn't entirely niched, but as I continued to practice and realized that like, this is my space, like I am speaking at events, have my own podcast on it. I should just really go all in. That's kind of when I decided to go all in, I suppose. And just, that calling, that purpose, it just felt like it made sense. I personally, one of the first properties, the standalone property we purchased, we bought on a place without regulation and the regulation changed and the township has banned them. And so we're in a lawsuit with that. And so, that personal experience, I was like, there's just not enough attorneys. When we were looking for an attorney to help us, because at this time I hadn't had my law firm yet, I was like, there's not attorneys in this space. There's not people who are specializing in this. And so to me, that was like just like a motivation to really specialize and help people sort of avoid the situation that I ended up in.
Yeah. What have been your learnings? Like as people are out there doing acquisitions, it's really step one. They find a property and they buy it. What are some things you learned and some things you recommend that they look for so that they don't end up with new regulation? I know you can never eliminate that. That's always going to happen. But what are some things, just as you've got your investor hat on and your attorney hat on, what are some things you recommend people look for when they're going to buy that next property?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be like very state specific. Like it's going to depend on the state's rules and things like that. Some states have been more favorable to short-term rentals, like Wisconsin, Idaho, Minnesota. They have like these, Florida even has these like state preemption type rules where it's like you local municipalities cannot ban short-term rentals. So you're kind of a little bit safer in some of those states. But other states like Michigan don't have those rules. And they actually have had case law that's the opposite that says, hey, municipalities can ban short-term rentals, and by the way, like, you're not going to necessarily be grandfathered if they do so, even if you've been doing it prior to that ban, right? So with that, I would say if you're going to be purchasing something, oftentimes it's a six-figure investment, right? In terms of the furniture, the down payment, even your time, if you think of your time is valuable as well there. So I would say, you're just going to want to probably get a local real estate attorney to help you to vet the property and to make sure that you can actually short-term rent the property. There's things beyond just regulation that you're going to want to look for, including HOAs, right? I've had people purchase properties in HOAs, not realize that they did not allow short-term rentals. They start doing it. They get a cease and desist from the HOA. That's a common scenario. Deed restrictions are super common, in Michigan particularly, Texas as well, Kentucky too. And that's just where it's separate and distinct from an HOA, but it's where like there's some recorded restrictions within the deed. It's not actually in the deed itself, but it'll be in your title work that say that the property is only to be used a certain way. And so if it says, hey, like particularly in Michigan, you can't use this for commercial use or residential use only, that means you're not gonna be able to use that property for a short-term rental. I've had several people buy properties with deed restrictions, didn't realize there were deed restrictions because again, it's like not super open and obvious. And then they get sued by their neighbor and have to shut down.
Is that a distinction that all states differentiate short-term rentals? Are they almost always considered commercial properties?
No, they're not actually. It depends on the state. So Wisconsin doesn't consider them commercial property. Michigan does. So it really just is, very state dependent. So that's why having like a local real estate attorney who knows those ins and outs of the state regulations is going to be really helpful. We help people in Michigan on the regulation piece. Outside of that, I'm licensed in multiple states, but I prefer to I know Michigan so well, so I stay in my lane for regulation in Michigan.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would assume that the vast majority of people are not taking that due diligence step. And they're just seeing a house that they like on Zillow. They're talking to the realtor. Oh, great. It's got a cool view and it's got a nice deck and it's got a spot for a pickleball court. Let's do this. So they're not taking that next step to look at deed restrictions and local regulations and even HOA rules, right? Where I agree with you. I've seen a lot of people buy properties in HOAs and then they find out 3 months later that they can't do what they thought they could do. And so what are the potential pushbacks for buying a property? And this might spark a much deeper conversation, but if you buy a property, like where does the line between property owners' rights and deed restrictions, local regulations, things like that? Like, is that a blurry line or is it simply you're shit out of luck? Doesn't matter that you own the property, doesn't matter you have property owner's rights. If the city says no, you're done.
Really depends on where you're at, right? And what the local law says. So, I mean, I can just give you an example from Michigan in terms of like, okay, you bought a property and the regulation changed. Well, you got to go look at what the regulation was before and see if there's room for an interpretation that short-term rentals were allowed under that existing regulation. But the problem is a lot of times people buy them in these residential zones. So it's like zoned to R1. So you look at the zoning ordinance and zoning in R1 says single family residential use only, no commercial activity. And the courts in Michigan have interpreted if that's what the zoning says, that means no short-term rentals. And so now you don't have this grandfather argument, right? I mean, we're still fighting it because of what the township told people, and fighting it for like a federal takings, like that they took our property rights, like you're saying. But, unfortunately, there's just been really bad case law, at least in Michigan and in some other states as well. But other states, there's been favorable stuff too. Like North Carolina, I know they've done like some grandfathering there. So it's just really going to depend on where you're at. And then definitely it's worth fighting, of course, for property rights. But then sometimes if you're in this situation, right, and it comes down to, okay, I bought a property and the township is doing something wrong or the HOA is wrong or whoever's wrong, right? It comes down to, okay, do I want to fight this? Because litigation is so expensive. Not only expensive, it's time consuming and it can take years. So it's like, do I really want to put all my energy in that bucket or should I just sell, move on and find something where they want me to be there?
Can you oftentimes continue to operate as you're fighting that fight if you decide you want to fight that fight, or what's the legal rules around that?
Yeah, it'll depend, like, right? So in the case of, for example, a deed restriction case, sometimes people will still operate and while they fight it just to see what the outcome of the case is. And you just have to be really careful if you do that because you might get an order by a court telling you not. So once you get an order by a court, that's when you're going to, need to comply with that order. Because if you don't, then you can be found to, be in contempt of court, face serious fines or jail, jail even potentially. I don't know anyone who's ever gone to jail for it, but that could happen if you continue to like just ignore a court after they tell you not to do something.
Interesting. Okay, well, there's so much nuance to this, and I know a lot of people every case and every situation in every state is really different, and so it makes sense. I love the idea and just telling people, hey, you guys should do some serious due diligence from a legal perspective from a compliance perspective, and like you said, reaching out to you or hiring a local real estate attorney that knows what they're doing could be a great idea. What about after you own the house? So you own the house, and how do you mitigate your risk? A lot of us are getting guests from OTAs. A vast majority of us get our guests from OTAs. We don't have people sign separate rental agreements. They just show up through the agreement that they signed with Airbnb. What can we do to mitigate some of the risk that we have when guests are staying at our property?
Yeah, I mean, they're not really signing an agreement with Airbnb. All they're doing is agreeing to their terms and service, which is an agreement too. But yeah, I would say that there's 4 pillars to really trying to mitigate your risk when you host on Airbnb or VRBO or on your own website. And so the 4 pillars would be insurance. You're going to want to make sure you have really good insurance and that the insurance actually covers what you're doing. I think this is a common mistake that I've seen. People get insurance, but it's not the right insurance, and then they submit a claim and they get it denied, right? Because you're going to want to make sure you have off-premise liability, liability for dogs, whether you allow them or not, liability for any sort of amenities you offer. The list goes on and on. So insurance is a really important one. Second pillar, I would say, is LLCs. You're going to want to make sure you have an LLC set up, and not just set up. You want to make sure you're operating it properly, meaning that you would put your property into that LLC, and then once it's in the LLC, you operate that LLC separate and distinct from you. Separate email address can be helpful, having all your bills and things like that separate, just really making sure it's like not you. So there's no argument that an attorney could make that you just pierced the corporate veil. That LLC was you. It wasn't operated separately. You acted the same. You signed contracts for that house in your personal name. So once you have that LLC, you just want to make sure you're operating as that LLC. The next one, of course, is a rental agreement. I recommend a rental agreement and having all your guests sign it. I know people say like, hey, like I'm worried about like the hospitality experience and getting pushback, things like that. I use one. I don't get pushback. Do I get cancellations sometimes, like within that first little period? Absolutely. People, if they don't want to sign it, they don't have to stay here. I'm very occupied. I'm totally fine if they don't want to sign it.
Do you send that right after someone books through like an OTA? If you go to booking.com, VRBO, Airbnb booking, you send them your rental agreement? How does that work?
Yeah, immediately through my property management system.
Okay, cool. So you've got their email address, and your PMS sends out the new rental agreement, and then they just DocuSign it basically?
Exactly right. Yep.
Cool. What do you guys do if somebody doesn't sign it? Like, do you cancel their reservation?
Well, we would, yeah, or not give them the check-in details if someone doesn't sign it. They have to you can have it set up so they don't get the lock code until they sign it. And then people just will cancel. If they don't want to sign it, that's fine. You can go stay somewhere else that doesn't have a rental agreement.
Okay, cool. And you obviously put together that rental agreement?
Yes, I did. Yeah. And that's something that I do, have on my website, strlaw.com. You can download the rental agreement there. It's like a template that people can use. It's DIY, so you can just fill it in. I know real estate investors love to be DIY, so you can fill it in for yourself. It comes with a video explaining it. So that I have a bunch of different contracts that people can use on the website if they so desire to better protect themselves.
Okay, cool. So you get a rental agreement. What else can you do to kind of mitigate that risk? Obviously, we hear stories, and I look at it through the construction and the setup lens. I posted today about a hot tub being on a deck that was not structurally engineered for having a hot tub. And the deck is bowing and is likely at some point in the future going to fail and probably going to hurt somebody. And so I think about mitigating risk through the lens of setup and construction and making sure that bunk beds are safe for kids, and we don't have hot tubs on decks that they're not supposed to be on, and handrails are the height that they need to be. They're at least 36 inches or 42 for a commercial property. And just thinking through all of that stuff, do you think through as a host that kind of stuff as well on top of the legal? How do you kind of differentiate the two?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we didn't get there, but that was my last pillar, safety.
Oh, okay, cool. Sorry for cutting you off.
But yeah, so safety, and I think it's often overlooked, but this is the most important one, because your rental agreement won't save you, your insurance won't save you, and if you aren't operating in safe, for that hot tub example, for example, that person could be considered negligence per se because they didn't build it to code. So if you're not following the codes, that can be considered negligence per se. And if you're grossly negligent, then that's when a personal injury attorney is really going to go after you. They're going to, you can't waive gross negligence. So even though you might have someone indemnify and hold you harmless, you can't have them waive that gross negligence. And what you're describing, in my opinion, would be gross negligence. And so that's when those personal injury attorneys come in there. And so if you don't have basic things like smoke detectors, this is the most basic thing, but some people don't even have them. So that's why sometimes I like a regulated market. Actually, I really like a regulated market for that reason, is because the fire chiefs and inspectors will come in and at least, there's some basic safety that has been conducted by those folks. Like they come and they test your smoke detectors and things like that. It's, if you haven't gone through a safety inspection, you just might not realize like the things you should be doing, like mounting your fire extinguisher, not putting it under the sink, having an emergency exit plan with the address of the property. Because if someone's staying in your property, they don't know the address. Like if something happened and they need to call 911, they're going to be frantic. It'd be great for them to just have that address so they can call 911, especially if you have a pool. We can get into pool stuff too, but there's all sorts of stuff you're going to want to do if you have a pool to mitigate your risk. But the basic stuff you're describing, absolutely, because if you fix all that and make everything structurally sound, you're just less likely going to have an accident as well, right? Like it's about mitigating it, but also like avoiding it entirely.
100%. We should definitely talk about pools next, but you are right. I've seen people like put bunk beds in front of the egress windows so you can't even get out the window if there was a fire and things like that. So definitely thinking through that. Love that. Let's talk about pools because it's summertime. It's the middle of July and I've got my kids in swimming lessons, but the number one cause of death in the state of Florida we live in for children under 5 that is not disease related and accident related is drowning in swimming pools. And so it's something that terrifies us and I'm sure scares a lot of other people. However, pools drive a boatload of revenue. It's absolutely crazy the difference between a house with an in-ground pool and a house without a pool. Oftentimes the house with a pool makes twice as much money in revenue. And so how do you limit that risk, keep your guests safe when you've got a property with a pool?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a lot of different things that you can do if you have a pool. And I actually put together like a pool safety checklist. We can link it if you want, Mark, in the episode. But essentially, you're going to want to make sure if you have this pool that you have proper depth markers all around the pool, that you have that safety sign with where you are at, the location of the property. You have pool rules that outline the pool rules, how people are supposed to be using the pool. You can get these on Amazon, Etsy, all over the place. You have a shepherd's hook or some other life-saving feature that can help you save someone if someone were to, fall in the pool and not be able to swim. And then I also encourage water watcher tags. So that would be, having someone designated to be, quote, a water watcher where they're watching the kids. Because if everyone's watching the pool, no one's watching the pool. Like, I don't know if, it sounds like you have kids. I have kids too. And I've been in, I've got 3 siblings and we all have kids. So we've got like a ton of kids running around. And if we're at a pool, it's like kind of, you assume like that other adults watching your kids. You know what I mean? Like you could get caught up in a conversation. So having those designated water watcher tags makes it so one person's responsible for making sure that they're watching their children in the pool. Another thing that's come up is the flotation, like the floaties that people leave at the houses, for those cool pictures, things like that. Don't recommend that. I would just let people bring their own floaties there because people have drowned under the floaty devices. And then there's accusations that, because of that, they weren't able to see the kid and things like that. So just let them bring them to the property if they're going to have them. So that's a few of the things I can think of, like off the top of my head right now. But I do have that comprehensive checklist as well. And then, of course, making sure that your insurance covers you and that if you have any specific, actually often insurance companies will have the same requirements that I just listed out. So if you have any of those specific insurance requirements, that you're following them.
Yeah, I love that. What about fences? Like I know there's...
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
If you can do a pool fence, like we actually request it when we go to houses with pools, and almost always, I would say 9 times out of 10 people have had it, and they're like, "Yep, no worries, it's in the shed, and our cleaning crew or maintenance crew will set it up before you get there," and that's really, really nice peace of mind.
Florida, don't they require pool fences and pool alarms?
I do not believe it's a requirement for a short-term rental. It very well could be. I don't know the requirements, but just to own a pool, it is not a requirement.
Yeah, for the short-term rentals, I'm pretty positive they have some pretty strict requirements to save the lives that you were talking about.
It very well could be. I would say that
I
most
forgot
people
about that too. Pool alarms
most people are not following that requirement, but yes, it very well could be, and I don't know. So yeah, we could dive into that. How do you juggle, because you get to see the worst, obviously when you're on one end of it, you get to see the worst. You get to see the the lawsuits, the damages, the headache, the heartache, the money that it costs. How do you juggle like that, knowing that, with also being a host and wanting to provide good hospitality and make money and make that a profitable endeavor for you? How do you juggle those two different mindsets?
Yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, I still haven't bought a property with a pool. So even though there's a lot of money there, but to me, that's just such a high risk. I don't know, maybe someday, but it helps. You make a better host, you see these things and it helps me, seeing these things. I'm constantly making tweaks to my rental agreement. You know what I mean? Like something happens and it's like, oh, well, we should probably put that in there. Or, for example, I had a client who had someone bring like a turkey fryer to their property and they used the turkey fryer in the heat of the summer and caught the lawn on fire, a huge fire. Yeah. And, in our rental agreement, we say you only can cook in designated places. And it's like, well, that's why, right? We don't want people to bring turkey fryers. So we might add like no turkey fryers, you know what I mean? So it's just like, as these things happen, it just makes me a better attorney and also host, I would say.
Yeah. I feel like your rental agreement is maybe a lot like your description of your property, where the longer you have it, the longer the description gets and the longer the rules get. And you're like, oh, I didn't realize we had to tell people not to do this stupid thing. Like, it's like that common sense goes is just completely out the window with certain guests. Does your description on your listing match and your rules match your rental agreement? Are you putting that there for them as well?
I don't put the whole agreement in there, but I do, say it's available upon request and that you have to sign a rental agreement before booking with me. Technically, I believe Airbnb does want you to have the whole agreement on there. But I mean, it's like, I don't know, maybe 6 pages long. So I didn't do that. And again, like, I'm okay if someone's like, I don't want to book here, like cancel, fine, have all your money back. No problem by me.
Yeah, I hear you. Cool. With all the regulation talk throughout the country, it's obviously a really, really hot topic. And there's municipalities coming down and saying, nope, you can't do this anymore. And other people saying, what do you mean? We've been doing this for years. This is our property. This is our business. You're not just going to shut us down. And so I'm seeing a lot of like class action lawsuits popped up. You mentioned that you're in one with a municipality. Where do you stand on that? And you mentioned for some people it's not worth the fight, but for those people that do think it's worth the fight and they say, you know what, no, I'm not going to let you infringe upon my rights. What we're doing is great for the community. And I'm a big advocate of short-term rentals. We've got a property in an HOA, and our property is frankly one of the nicest houses in that neighborhood. It gets professionally cleaned every 3 days, professionally landscaped, it gets pressure washed once a year, and the long-term rentals that are around our house are. And so I'm like, what do you mean that our short-term rental is a negative impact on this neighborhood? It's the nicest thing in this neighborhood. It's actually a positive impact on the neighborhood. It's bringing in people, almost all families that are traveling here for vacation. They're spending money at local restaurants. They're going to the ice cream shop. It is a positive thing for this community. So that's my opinion, and I am always down for the fight. Like, I will be the first one who's like, yep, 3 years, 4 years, no worries. We'll do it because it's the right thing. How do you differentiate that? I know it's a long-winded question, but how do you differentiate for investors of when it's time to fight, when it's worth standing up for your rights, and when it's worth selling a property and walking away?
Gosh, that's such a personal question, I think, for that investor in terms of their time, resources, and energy, right? And then probability of success. So I think it really just depends on the situation, what the local politics is, what connections they have to the local politics. A lot of this local stuff is very, very political. So if they're, buddies with the township supervisor and the board, and we think we can get some grandfathering in, even though it's not required, that might be a different analysis than like a board that's just absolutely, hard to work with, things like that. Another strategy too is just like flipping the board, flipping the deciders, getting some good favorable people in to office. So that can be a political strategy as well. But again, I'm all about it. I still own my property. We're still fighting. We've been in this lawsuit for, a few years now, 4 years now. So, it continues to happen, and, we haven't sold. We've decided that we want, it's worth holding on to this property, and, we think it's a great property in a great area. And, the upside for us is huge. Like, if we end up getting grandfathered, we'll be one of very few properties, and, saturation's a real thing. I know people say saturation's no big deal, but depending on where you're at, it really makes a huge difference in terms of your bookings and revenue and everything.
100%. There's a good example. There's 4,000 short-term rentals in Anaheim, California at the park, and there's 40,000 short-term rentals in Orlando at the park. And so those people in California, where there's no more licenses, no more new short-term rentals to be had, are absolutely crushing it and can't believe that they got one of the 4,000. And then the folks in Orlando, it's just a bloodbath because you can do anything you want and there's so many properties to compete with. So I agree with that 100%. Do you think that people have like, I know this is like very personal, but do you think people have a moral obligation to stand up and fight for what's fair and right? And or do you think that, like, I guess when I see people that just quit on things that they should be standing up for because it's a little bit difficult, do you think that they have like do they have a moral obligation to fight for their property owners' rights and for their community and to everyone else who's investing in the short-term rental industry? If we all stood up and were like, no, this is not fair, you're not going to scapegoat us and trample us, we're going to stand up to these municipalities and these rules, like, what are your thoughts on that? That's a loaded question, I know.
No, that's a lot going on there. But I think there's a lot of great advocacy groups coming out because of this thing, because of these things. Like, Michigan has one, Maestra, I think is what it's called. And, I was a board member there for a bit on Michigan's Short-Term Rental Association. So there's a lot of different states now that are forming those associations because to really rally people to say, like, we should all fight together, power in numbers, we should all go to our legislators, we should all talk to them. And I know Airbnb is trying to create, I think, a circuit split to get the Supreme Court of the United States to decide some of this stuff. So it's an interesting developing area of law, both from, a host standpoint and also from a lawyer standpoint. It's just kind of interesting to see where it's going to develop.
Do you think that all this is happening because the industry's so new or because it's such a different use case for a property than really has ever been done, right? 20, 30 years ago, outside of owning a little cabin at a lake in the middle of the woods, no one rented out their property in a neighborhood to strangers for a weekend and then they would leave. And so it's such a new thing. Is that why we have so many of these lawsuits popping up and so many of these regulations happening and so much division and so much kind of backlash on short-term rentals? Do you think that's the reason?
Yeah, I think that's a big reason. It is very new. I mean, granted, vacation rentals as a whole have been a thing for a long time. Like in the town that we're fighting, hundreds of years, 100 years, vacation rentals have been a thing. They are more like weekly rentals, as opposed to the short weekends. So I think that's some of it too. That just the nature of vacation rentals have changed where it's, people let people come for 2 days or whatever, that offends people in some way. And then just, the idea that it's a family neighborhood and they don't necessarily want the house to be changing over all the time. And that wasn't common forever ago, so, but if that's what you don't want, then, you could live in associations or, places that don't allow them that way. Right. There's a balance. Certainly can be a balance. I think that regulation makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that you wouldn't want to necessarily live next to 10 short-term rentals. So, it's good to have it fair and balanced. And from a host perspective, like you said, the more regulated it is, it can be also beneficial to us financially. So I think that hosts should be for fair, reasonable regulation. I'm not someone who's not for regulation at all, because I think it also saves lives with the safety aspect. I know that there's differing opinions on that, but that's kind of where I stand on it.
Let's talk about the future, where we go from here. Thank you for all that. I gave you some loaded questions, and it's just such a fascinating topic. We could probably talk on this for hours, but then people wouldn't listen because they'd be like, Mark, that's too long of an episode. Where do we go from here? You mentioned that Airbnb is trying to get something in front of the Supreme Court. If we look down the road 10 or 15 or 20 years, do you think that the industry has basically settled out and leveled out and that regulations are basically set in stone everywhere? There's some pretty standard rules of operating and it's not the wild, wild west anymore? Or do you think that this plays out for many, many, many years to come?
Yeah, no, great question. I think, it probably will settle like anything. I'm just trying to think of something that's analogous in the case law world, where it's a new thing and then it kind of settled out.
I mean, I heard a lot of people compare it to when automobiles came out, right? And they're like, oh, we don't have speed limits and we don't have rules for the road and we didn't even have seat belts. And now you basically have standard operating rules all across the country that are pretty universal and everyone seems to agree that this is fair and reasonable.
Absolutely. I think that's a good comparison. Yeah. So I think that's what will happen with the short-term rental industry. It just has to catch up. I mean, will there be places where there's still not regulation? Probably. I mean, there's still places where there's literally no regulation and it's a free-for-all. You can do whatever you want. There's some places like that in Texas. But I do think that it will even out and that, it'll catch up and, we'll probably get more regulated like the hotel industry, if I had to guess, just for the safety aspect and saving lives. That would be the direction I think it's going to go in 20 years.
Okay, cool. I hope that we get there sooner than later because I think that will probably be good for everybody. Last thing I want to leave you with, this might be fun if you're open to it, which is, do you have a crazy short-term rental law story that you can share You don't have to give any like super crazy specific details, but just something insane that's happened that you're like, as an attorney and as a host, I would have never thought that this would have happened, and this happened to some client.
I have a few that I'm thinking of, but I don't have client consent right now at the moment, so I might have to come back and tell some of them. But yeah, no, I have a couple crazy ones for sure. I mean, it's just like the craziest things that people do at rentals. Okay, you just never know what's going to happen. I mean, the air fryer, the turkey fryer one, I thought was pretty wild with the lawn catching on fire, things like that. But yeah, no, I've got something on my mind, but client consent's a big thing for me. I always keep client confidentiality unless someone
I
asks
hear
me
you.
for consent.
I hear you. The turkey fryer is a good one. I'll tell you, we had somebody show up with their own lawn equipment and mow our lawn. And we're like, what are you doing? We have a lawn care company that comes like every week. And we're like, the yard is not long. It's beautifully maintained yard. Why are you in our yard mowing our lawn right now? And so guests do just wild stuff. And so maybe one day we'll have you back on to talk about some crazy stories. Katie, I know you've got a lot of great resources on your website for folks. I'm going to link your website in the show notes so people can connect and access those. What's the best way they can reach out to you? If they've got questions, concerns, if they need help with rental agreements, if they need help with due diligence, all that good stuff.
Yeah, on my website, there's a way to book a call. I think my email address is on there as well. So, you can book a call if you want. That's probably the best way to do it. I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn and stuff like that. You can find me there. I put out a lot of content on just how to, better protect yourself legally.
Cool. Katie, thank you for coming on. It was a fun conversation, fascinating topic, something we all can spend a little bit more time focusing on to protect ourselves down the road. And I'll make sure to drop all your notes in the channel here for everybody to see. So Katie, thanks for coming on. Keep doing good work. And hopefully we never have to walk into a courtroom together, but I'm sure if we did that you'd kick ass.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
See you, Katie. Bye.